Let's talk about finding love, but forget swiping right. We're going to wind the clock all the way back to the 1840s and follow one real couple's journey to the altar. It's a story that opens up a whole different world, one where partnership, community, and just plain survival were all wrapped up in the idea of romance. Seriously, think about it. How did you find the one before dating apps, before social media, before you could even text someone? It's a simple question, right? But the answer shows us a completely different reality. Where do you even start? Well, for starters, your entire world of options was right there in your physical community. You met potential partners at church, at big community work events like a barn raising, or during really formal family visits. Everything was out in the open, and you better believe everyone knew everyone's business. So our story kicks off in a tiny pioneer settlement in Upper Canada, what we'd now call Ontario, right around 1838. And at the center of it all are two young people, Alexander Sovereen and Elizabeth Putnam. Alexander, he's 24, he's strong, he's capable, and he's the son of the guy who founded the town. In a frontier community, yeah, he was a serious catch. And then there's Eliza. She's 18, from a really well-respected family, and she's known for having all the domestic skills you needed to run a household back then. So, on paper, they were pretty much the perfect match for their time. And this is something we really have to get our heads around. Marriage wasn't just about romance. Not at all. It was a practical partnership. It was a crucial economic and social deal. I mean, choosing a partner was one of the biggest decisions you could make for your own survival and your family's standing in town. So how does a guy like Alexander even begin to pursue a woman like Eliza? Well, it turns out there was a very clear unwritten playbook. And let me tell you, it had almost nothing to do with spontaneous romantic gestures. You know what's so fascinating here is that this is basically the compatibility checklist of the 1840s. For Alexander, his value was his family name, his land, his prospects, his character. For Eliza, it was her age, her skills at home, and her family's good name. And look at that last row. Their shared Baptist faith was a huge asset for both of them. This was about a partnership of shared values through and through. The whole process was incredibly formal. Alexander couldn't just walk up to Eliza and ask her out. No way. First, he had to get his own father's blessing. Then, he had to go and formally ask Eliza's father for permission to even begin courting her. And this wasn't some casual chat. It was a serious negotiation. Only after both families gave the green light could the courtship actually begin. And courting itself, it was a very public, very supervised affair. We're talking visits at Eliza's family home, with her parents or siblings always in the room. Maybe they'd sit together at church, take a chaperoned walk, or sing hymns. Even the gifts were practical. He might bring game he'd hunted. She might sew him a shirt. This was all about demonstrating your keepability, not your passion. And here's the crucial point. In a settlement this small, there were no secrets. The entire community was the audience for your courtship. Your reputation and your family's was on the line every single day. Getting the community's nod of approval was almost as important as getting the family's. Okay, so after a successful courtship, which could last about a year, the relationship moved into its next super serious phase, the formal commitment and all the intense preparations for building a life together. And you can forget about the bended knee and the surprise diamond ring. A pioneer proposal was, you guessed it, another formal negotiation. Alexander would go back to Eliza's father to officially ask for her hand in marriage. The whole conversation would be about his character and his ability to provide. Only after that permission was granted would he actually propose to Eliza. It was a promise of a shared future. This is where you really see the partnership in action even before the wedding. The engagement period was for work. Eliza would be sewing her trousseau, all the clothes and linens she'd bring to the marriage. At the same time, Alexander was out clearing more land, building their home, and getting the farm ready. They were literally working in parallel to build their future from day one. And then finally, the day arrived. On March 3rd, 1840, Alexander and Eliza were ready to make their partnership official, and you can bet the whole community was there to see it. Now, the wedding itself was modest, but deeply meaningful. It probably happened in the simple log cabin they used as a church. The bride and groom wore their best, most practical clothes, no fancy white gowns or tuxedos. The ceremony was simple, the vows were solemn, and everyone understood them to be a sacred, binding promise before God and their entire community. The party that followed was a true community affair. The wedding feast wasn't catered. It was basically a giant potluck. All the local families brought whatever they could spare. And that was such a powerful symbol of the community's support. They were all invested in the success of this new family. And then came the really fun part, a chivalry. This was this wild local tradition where friends and neighbors would sneak up to the newlyweds' cabin on their wedding night and just make a huge racket, banging pots and pans until the couple came out and gave them treats. It was this rowdy, good-natured welcome to married life. So after this carefully planned, community-approved marriage, what kind of life did they actually build? What was the result of this very practical approach to love? Well, their life started humbly. Their first home was a simple log cabin, likely built by Alexander himself. It probably had a loft for sleeping and just one big fireplace for all their cooking and heat. And from that tiny cabin, they would build everything. They were married for 55 years. 55! They stayed together until Eliza's death in 1895. That's over half a century of partnership, facing every single hardship the frontier could throw at them, together. And in that time, they raised 14 children. 14. Just let that sink in. It's a number that speaks to a lifetime of shared work and joy, but also profound loss. Like many families then, they also had to bury several children, which was just a tragic reality of the era. Decades later, a newspaper article described Alexander in his old age with that line. And that tells you everything, doesn't it? Despite the practical, almost business-like start to their marriage, a deep, genuine affection had clearly grown. It tells us that this partnership, built on respect and shared values, blossomed into a real, lasting love. So the bedrock of their long marriage was this powerful mix of things. It wasn't just one thing. It was their shared faith, a mutual respect for what each person brought to the table, practical compatibility, and an affection that wasn't proven with big romantic gestures, but through the quiet commitment of sharing an entire lifetime. Their story feels like it's from another planet sometimes, but it really leaves us with a fascinating question to chew on. In our world of endless choices and grand romantic ideals, what can a practical 19th century partnership, one built on purpose and relying on each other, teach us about what it really means to build a life with someone?